Welcome to the Chapter 5 review. You'll see me looking down at my slides quite a bit as I go through these. Again, I'm willing to give you this test review because A, I want you to do well, and B, if I get you to listen to this, then I should be able to reinforce the main points. So away we go. So this slide isn't terribly important, and it sets the stage and just says what does the competitive strategy refer to, and it's the way that you're going to try to attract your customers, outmaneuver your rivals, and that sort of stuff. Next, why do they differ? Well, because they see the world differently. They have different set of resource strengths. And again, this slide isn't terribly important. This slide introduced you to the 5 basic competitive approaches. So remember, we talked about the sort of their appeal. Are they a low-cost provider? Or are they running a differentiation strategy? And then how wide is the target market? Broad versus narrow. And then we talked about this middle bubble, which Michael Porter, when he put this theory out, didn't believe existed, which is this hybrid of the 2 approaches of the cost leadership and the differentiation. So let's talk about a cost leadership strategy. How does a cost leadership or low cost strategy work? Well, importantly, you don't have the cheapest product out there necessarily. It's a product that typically is considered on par, or it has the essential attributes that customers are looking for. And again, we use that reference of Cici's Pizza versus some of the other pizzas, where yes, Cici's was running in theory, a low-cost strategy, but everybody recognized that their pizza wasn't nearly as good as other people's pizza, and they didn't expect to pay nearly as much for it. So you don't want to have a product that is perceived as noticeably inferior to what is the industry standard. You're looking for that on par sort of product. And because of that, there are 2 general channels for how low-cost providers make superior returns, and I'll be talking about that in a later slide. So again, you've got to have a product that's on par, that has the essential features, but the key is you have to be able to lower your costs. Because of that, when you look at the value chain, a low-cost strategy surrounds itself with making smart trade-offs in the value chain to try to squeeze out the cost wherever possible while retaining that essential quality that customers expect out of their product. Some of the ways that, and this is a very important slide conceptually. I want to make sure you understand this. How does a low-cost advantage strategy manifest itself to superior returns? One is that they because you have lower cost, you can price yourself underneath competitors who have similar quality products. So you retain the same profit margin as they have because you've underpriced them, but you have lower cost. And because you've underpriced them, you build your volume because people come. Or you have the option of charging the same price as everyone else, just settling for kind of the average market share, but you have fatter profit margins. So either one of those paths work. This slide just suggests some of the ways that you're able to, in fact, achieve that lower cost as you manage the supply chain. Operating facilities at full capacity. You see that with Globus about having your plants operate as quickly as possible. Pursuing ways to boost labor productivity, reduce workforce size, and otherwise trim compensation costs. Again, that's something that you're working toward in Globus. These are some of the other ways, but again, it's not about producing a no-frills product. It's about producing a product that people see as relatively on par. The benefits of a cost leadership is it's a very strong position with price-sensitive customers. So if you go into Porter's 5 forces, if you have low switching costs, if you have aggressive industry competition, if you have relatively little differentiation, these customers are going to tend to prefer products on price, and that's where a low-cost provider really comes out in full force. The danger is that you could price your products so low that you have no profit margin. You could also make your product of so little quality that people don't want to buy it. This is a slide that was hidden when I made the presentation, but this goes over. If you look at these with a Porter's 5 forces, these are going to make complete sense to you when the strategy works best. On to differentiation. We'll look at a later slide where it talks about the bases for differentiation. Here what you're trying to do is offer the customer a product that has noticeably superior attributes to the competitors that makes them want to value it. Now, this is a critical point to keep in mind about a differentiation strategy. Its differentiation strategies aren't successful because they offer a better product. They are successful because they offer a better product that people pay much more for it than what it cost you to provide it. So in other words, you should be seeing healthy profit margins because you have offered this additional piece of differentiation. And the illustration we used in class is we looked at the cost of an Apple iPhone and showed you how little it costs them to boost your RAM and how much they charge you for that RAM. And so that's a great example of where they have very strong product differentiation. If you want the upscale feature, great, but you're going to pay a very healthy price differential to achieve it. Here are some of the ways with some companies that you'll know that they offer differentiation. What goes wrong in differentiation? Well, this is where you make the mistake of thinking that you can charge people through the nose. In other words, you raise your camera quality, but you raise a little bit, but you raise your prices a lot. Or you raise your camera quality a lot, you raise your prices so much, though, that you've just priced yourself out of the market. Those are the typical mistakes that a differentiator makes when it doesn't work well. Again, this is a slide that I hid in the original presentation. This is the premium price. They also make the point that you can increase sales or volume through the differentiation features where you don't have to have a real necessarily superior profit margin. I would argue, though, that when you're doing that, typically you're really running more of a best cost strategy because you could have charged a lot more for it. You also, successful differentiation strategies build brand loyalty, which tends to reduce people's price sensitivity. Again, this one we've talked about how it works, but it fails when people just aren't willing to pay for it, and also if it can be easily copied. Again, here, what trade-offs are involved with a differentiation strategy is making sure that the value chain delivers on that promise of superior value. It is not carte blanche to spend money recklessly or to pay no attention to your cost, but you have to be very careful that you don't puncture what makes your product special in your desire to create a lower cost product. These are some of the ways that you communicate that value, and if you think of it as the Tiffany's example we used, Tiffany's charges a high price, they have fancier packaging, they have very high-end ad campaigns, they put a lot of money into having high-end retailers and very professional employees. And this is why when we looked at the comparison of Blue Nile and Tiffany's, we saw that Blue Nile's cost of goods sold was so much higher a percentage because typically a low-cost provider won't spend money on these things. They spend all their money into simply producing the product. And that's why their cost of goods sold will be higher. They don't put as much fluff and stuff in terms of marketing around it. On to focus, we talked about there are any number of ways that you can focus, with the temptation being when a company has a successful focus strategy, they might want to expand broad market, and then that can actually hurt their profit margins as they move out into the broader market. Let's see, let's keep going. Then we get into the final strategy, that middle ground, which our textbook calls a best cost strategy. I left these words on the slides just to remind you that lots of other people call it different things. Usually hear it called an integrated strategy or a combination strategy, not best cost. But for the exam purposes, we'll go with best cost. And now you're trying to get that middle ground. You're trying to differentiate on a few features and make your company stand out positively while still paying a tremendous amount of attention to driving out cost. The advantages of this are really clear because now what you're able to do is offer people a better product, and in some cases for cheaper than your competitors who don't even have as good a product as you have when you're really hitting this exactly right. And it's just obvious what a strong competitive position that is. So think about it in Globus. If in the multi-feature line you're able to offer a 3-star camera, but you've got the cost wrung out to the point where you can produce it as cheaply as your competitors can produce a 2-star camera. You can see how strong that is. And because of that, a best cost strategy is usually the most profitable, and it is the most difficult to imitate, which makes a very strong strategy, but it's usually also the most difficult to execute successfully because it's a balancing act. You don't have this natural home of we're really trying to upscale our features or we're really trying to cut out the cost. You're trying to do multiple things at once, and you have this danger of being stuck in the middle. So a very powerful strategy, just not always easy to execute successfully. And so here's some slides on how that happens. They provide more value by giving some extra features while charging a great price. And I've already talked about that. I'm backing up on the slides. My apologies. And here's the big risk. Squeezed between rivals. And this is that stuck in the middle where it's so hard to pull off right. That is a 12-minute recap of Chapter 5. Look forward to you doing great on the exam. Thanks.